Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I was 3 feet away when it happened. 3 feet. That's nothing in a crowded ballroom, but it might as well have been a wall. I stood near the catering table with a glass of Merlot in one hand and a flimsy plate of canapes in the other, watching Miranda laugh with Rayan and two board members like she'd stepped into a spotlight that wasn't meant for me. Rayan was one of those men who never needed to raise his voice. Tall, sharp suit, a grin that looked practiced in the mirror. He leaned in just enough to make the conversation feel private while making sure everyone else could hear. "You'll have to excuse us if we're late on Monday," he said. "Strategy sessions tend to run long when the company wine is this good." The table laughed. Miranda tilted her head, glass in hand, and answered before anyone else could. "Relax, he's just a friend," she said, loud enough for the directors across the room to hear. That sentence hung in the air. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even looked in my direction. But they were already standing too close for just friends. His hand brushed her elbow as he leaned in, not possessive, just familiar. She smiled at something he whispered, that half laugh she used to save for me. She rested her fingers lightly on his arm, not enough to draw attention, but enough to make the truth obvious to anyone watching closely. She was wearing the silver cuff I'd given her 2 anniversaries ago. She once told me it was too delicate for work events, but tonight it was on full display, catching the light every time she moved her wrist. I cleared my throat, a small reminder that I was present. Her eyes flicked past me like I was a waiter carrying the wrong tray. I thought about stepping forward, joining the circle, asking a pointed question. Instead, I set the plate down and walked toward the exit without saying goodbye. By the time I reached the car, the decision had already taken shape. I wasn't going to argue, beg, or make a scene. I would leave the job, the apartment, and the silence she'd built between us. That night, not tomorrow, not after a talk. Tonight. Back home, I opened my laptop, typed a 2-sentence resignation, and hit send. On the kitchen counter, I left a note that said only, "Since he's just a friend, you won't need me to explain why I'm gone." Then I packed a small bag, closed the door quietly, and drove into the night. The Harbor Light Motel sat off the interstate, tucked between a gas station and a pawn shop that never seemed to close. Its neon sign flickered the word vacancy like a nervous habit. I pulled in just after midnight, killed the engine, and sat there for a full minute. Inside, the clerk didn't ask questions. He slid a key across the counter. The silence between us was the first clean moment I'd had all evening. In the room, the carpet smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes. I set my bag on the chair and opened the laptop again. My resignation email had already bounced a reply. Received. Exit interview scheduled. No phone calls, no apologies. The quiet confirmed what I already knew. I had been optional for longer than I realized. I pulled a notepad from my bag and wrote down 3 rules. No dramatic phone calls, no chasing confessions. Only facts, no noise. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. If there was a story unfolding between Miranda and Rayan, I'd see it in the details. Not in her words, not in excuses shouted across our kitchen, but in receipts, dates, calendars, the kind of things that don't lie. I showered, dressed in the same clothes again, and lay back on the stiff mattress. Sleep didn't come, but I didn't mind. For the first time in months, my next move felt simple. In the morning, I drove back into the city, not to confront anyone, but to drop my company badge in a padded envelope at the front desk. By noon, I was back at the Harbor Light, coffee in hand, staring at the blank notepad. If Miranda wanted to say, "just a friend," I'd let the evidence decide what kind of friend he really was. The first thing I checked was our shared photo storage. Miranda had forgotten, or maybe didn't care, that the account was still linked to my login. Dozens of new pictures had been uploaded since January. Group shots from off-site reviews, rooftop bars, and company mixers. Rayan appeared in most of them. Sometimes near her, sometimes right beside her. One shot caught my eye. A crowded table, wine glasses half drained, Miranda leaning toward him while someone else snapped the photo. The caption read, "Late nights build strong teams." Her hand was on the table, his resting inches from it. Not proof on its own, but I knew how to read body language. I opened the shared calendar next. Miranda's schedule was still there. Color-coded meetings, work trips, client dinners. I cross-checked them with the photo timestamps. The overlap was exact. Denver trip, March 3rd to 6th. Dinner labeled Vendor Hospitality. A photo from the same night showed just 2 wine glasses raised in a toast. No vendor in sight. I started listing dates, venues, and expense-heavy nights. I wasn't looking for drama. I was building a timeline, a clean chronology. Around 10, my inbox flashed with a new message from IT. Your access has been revoked effective immediately. That didn't bother me. I had already pulled what I needed. I sat back, staring at the neat rows of handwriting on the page. It wasn't rage I felt. It was confirmation. Miranda hadn't made a mistake at a party. This wasn't a one-off laugh. This was systematic, weeks in the making, layered into travel reports and receipts. I tore the sheet from the pad and folded it into my wallet. Proof wasn't for shouting in a bar or slamming onto a kitchen counter. Proof was leverage. 3 days later, I stopped at a coffee shop 2 towns over. It was one of those places that pretended to be quiet but was full of overheard conversations. I ordered a black coffee, sat in the corner, and listened without meaning to. 2 women behind me were deep in office gossip. I caught Miranda's name before I realized I was listening. "She's staying at Ryan's loft for now," one of them said, "until her lease thing clears up." The other laughed. "Lease thing, sure. They've been inseparable since the Denver trip." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. My timeline had just been confirmed out loud by people who had no idea I was sitting 10 feet away. That evening, their soft launch went public. Not in words, but in images. Ryan posted a shot of a wine glass held in front of city lights, captioned, "Late nights, right company." No tags but Miranda's bracelet. My bracelet was visible in the reflection on the glass. The next weekend, I saw them together in person. Downtown at a brand activation event her company sponsored. They stood side by side at a booth, laughing with junior staff, his hand brushing her back as if he owned the space. For half a second, her smile slipped. Then it returned, wider, polished, as though nothing in her world had shifted. I didn't approach. I didn't speak. Confrontation in public was noise, and noise was useless. Instead, I turned away and walked through the crowd. By the time I reached the street, the decision was clear. If Miranda and Ryan wanted to play just colleagues while burning company money in hotel suites and dinners, there was only one lever strong enough to cut through the performance. Compliance. Not a fight in a bar, not a dramatic scene in a ballroom. Facts, receipts, policy violations. That was the language they couldn't laugh off. I went back to the apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, the one window I knew Miranda would be tied up in meetings. The building manager barely glanced at me when I signed for the spare key. I didn't take much. A few shirts, my journals, the backup drive from the desk drawer. But in the laundry room, stuffed between detergent boxes, I found what I hadn't been looking for. A hotel folio folded inside a dry cleaning slip. The receipt listed a corporate card number, the charge filed as vendor hospitality. 2 entrees, 2 drinks, 1 room. In the bedroom closet, a branded tote from a marketing conference sat half-zipped. Inside was a printed itinerary for a client dinner. Only 2 names were typed on the guest list, Miranda Hale and Ryan Clark. That was enough. I didn't need a confession. I had documents. Back at Harbor Light, I spread everything across the bed. Receipts, itinerary, photo timestamps, calendar overlaps. It looked clinical, almost boring, exactly what compliance liked best. I called the anonymous line, voice steady. "This is regarding irregular expenses tied to the Denver trip and multiple client dinners. Policy Section 4.2 on hospitality spending. You'll want to cross-check March 3rd through 6th. The operator didn't ask my name. They only said, "Noted." 2 days later, I received a short email from Jenna in compliance. "We've received supporting documentation. Thank you for your clarity." Nothing more. No drama, no questions. That was the point. I wasn't looking for closure in words. Closure was the sound of a machine taking in evidence and turning it into action. I folded the receipts back into the envelope and set it in the desk drawer. Miranda had chosen her friend. Ryan had chosen arrogance. I had chosen facts. Miranda texted me first. "Can we talk?" Just the 2 of us. We met at a quiet bar on the edge of downtown. No crowd, no music loud enough to hide behind. She arrived 5 minutes late, coat draped over her arm, eyes searching for me like she wasn't sure I'd actually show. "I didn't think you'd answer," she said, sliding into the booth. "I don't answer often," I replied. but tonight seemed worth it. Miranda leaned forward, lowering her voice like this was a negotiation. Scott, you've been gone for weeks without a word. You just walked out. No explanation. I left a note, I said. Short but clear. She frowned. It was ending anyway. You and me. I just called him a friend in front of half the company, I cut in. Right before the trips, the dinners, the hotel receipts. Her face stiffened. So, that's what this is? You're keeping score? No, I said, calm. I'm keeping records. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She broke first. Whatever you think happened, it wasn't misconduct. We're adults. We can make our own choices. I nodded. Adults also follow company policy. Section 4.2, hospitality spending. Interesting phrase, isn't it? Hard to call it hospitality when the guest list has two names. Her jaw tightened. You went through my things. I went through what you left in plain sight, I said. The folio, the itinerary, calendar overlaps. You didn't even bother to hide it. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. For the first time, she looked unsure. Not guilty, not ashamed, just aware that I'd shifted the balance. You won't make me the villain in this, she said finally. I slid a 20 onto the table, covering my half of the untouched drinks. I'm not writing your part, Miranda. I'm just done playing mine. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out. She didn't follow. The fallout came faster than I expected. 2 weeks after that meeting, an internal memo leaked into the hands of the people who cared most: vendors, investors, and the board. Rayon was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Miranda's access badge was suspended the same afternoon. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from a mutual acquaintance in finance who called to confirm dates. They're pulling expense reports from 3 months back, he said. Somebody dropped a packet that lined everything up too neatly to ignore. I only said, that's what compliance is for. A week later, Jenna called me directly. She spoke in clipped tones, all business. Thank you for providing clarity. The audit is in motion. We won't need further input. Then she paused, as if she wanted to add something human, but didn't. That was enough. I signed a 3-month contract with a boutique analytics firm, a small place where nobody smiled for politics and nobody laughed too loudly at charity events. It was work, not theater. At night, I trained at a neighborhood boxing gym. It was simple, no posturing, no noise, just balance, movement, control. I liked the honesty of it. One morning, a package arrived at my P.O. box. Inside was the watch I had given Miranda years ago, tucked neatly into its case. A note on yellow stationery read, "You were steady." I wasn't. No name, no apology, nothing else. I didn't keep it. That weekend, I donated the watch to the Maritime Museum's upcoming auction, the same event where she had once said he was just a friend, a small loop, closed without words. By then, it no longer felt like loss. It felt like clearing a ledger. Debits, credits, balance restored. The divorce papers were signed in early spring. No fights, no shouting matches in court, just signatures on lines and a quiet division of property. The finality didn't sting. It settled like dust on a shelf that hadn't been touched in years. A month later, I saw her once more. The Maritime Museum was hosting another fundraiser, this time for a coastal restoration project. I had been invited through my new firm, a small recognition of steady work. Miranda stood near the entrance, hair tied back, her smile a little tighter than I remembered. We locked eyes for a moment. She gave a polite nod. I returned it. No words. No need. I didn't linger. I moved past the crowd and stepped outside onto the terrace. I stood 3 feet from a group chatting by the railing but felt no need to move closer. 3 feet wasn't a wall anymore. It was space I chose. That night, I walked back to my car without looking over my shoulder. The museum lights glowed behind me, the same place where this had all begun. Only this time, I wasn't the man being erased from the story. I was the man who had walked away on his own terms, left the noise behind, and never looked back. Thank you for watching.